My name is Sophia. I'm 27, and I've always been labeled as the troublemaker of the family, the one who never quite measured up to my perfect sister, Camilla. But on her wedding day, when my mother whispered those words to me, something inside finally broke free. I still remember how the crystal chandeliers caught the light that day, how everyone kept commenting on what a beautiful bride my sister made. Just like her mother, they'd say, while glancing at me with that familiar look of disappointment. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, determined that for once, just this once, I wouldn't be the family embarrassment. The ceremony had been flawless. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, the one Camilla had chosen because it minimized my tattoos and made me look more appropriate. I'd swallowed my pride, smiled for the photos, and even gave a rehearsed toast that my mother had practically written for me. But then came that moment at the reception. I accidentally knocked over a champagne glass while reaching for my phone. Nothing major, just a small puddle, quickly cleaned up. That's when my mother cornered me behind a floral arrangement, her smile never faltering for the guests who could see us, and whispered those words that would change everything. "We're embarrassed by your behavior. Can't you act normal for just one day? For your sister?" 27 years of feeling not enough crashed down on me in that instant, and something snapped. Before I could think twice, I was walking toward the head table, toward the microphone that the best man had just set down. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. What happened next would either destroy my family forever or finally set us all free. The breaking point. The reception hall of the Grand Meridian Hotel was everything Camilla had dreamed of. Cream-colored roses cascading from ceiling installations, gold-rimmed place settings, and a string quartet playing in the corner. Perfect. Just like her. I watched her from across the room, radiant in her designer gown, accepting congratulations with that effortless grace I'd never managed to master. I hadn't planned to cause a scene. God knows I'd spent my entire life trying not to be noticed, which is ironic for someone with purple hair and sleeve tattoos. But I'd toned it down for today, dyed my hair a respectable brown, covered what tattoos I could, and even worn the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. The ones my mother had initially tried to give to Camilla because they'd suit her classic style better. The champagne glass incident was trivial, barely noticeable in the grand scheme of things. But it became the final thread in a tapestry of disappointments I'd apparently woven throughout my life. My mother's eyes had that familiar look, the one that said I was, once again, the family liability. "We're embarrassed by your behavior. Can't you act normal for just one day? For your sister?" Normal. That word had haunted me since childhood. What was normal about pretending to be someone else? What was normal about a family that measured love in conformity? I stood there, her words ringing in my ears, watching her walk away to rejoin my father, the successful attorney who had never quite figured out how to talk to his younger daughter. They made their way to Camilla and her new husband, a perfect tableau of family unity. Without me. The microphone sat unattended at the head table. The best man had just finished his speech about how Camilla and Robert were meant to be, how their love was written in the stars. Everyone was still smiling, glasses raised. I don't remember deciding to move. One moment I was frozen by my mother's words, and the next I was walking, almost floating, across the reception hall. People noticed. My Aunt Elena's eyebrows shot up. My cousin Marco quickly looked away, already anticipating disaster. My father's business partner leaned over to whisper something to his wife. With each step, memories flashed through my mind. Camilla's straight-A report cards displayed on the refrigerator, while mine were tucked away in drawers. The time I wasn't included in the family Christmas card because my hair was going through a phase. The constant comparisons, subtle and not so subtle, that shaped my understanding of my place in our family. I reached for the microphone, my hand trembling but determined. The feedback squealed slightly, and heads turned. The room quieted. My mother's face drained of color. My father half rose from his seat, ready to intervene. Camilla looked at me with confusion, then alarm. This wasn't on the schedule. This wasn't planned. This wasn't normal. I took a deep breath and raised the microphone to my lips. In that moment, standing before everyone who had ever judged me, I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the truth that had been buried under years of polite smiles and silent resentments. A truth our family desperately needed to hear. The family history. Before I say what I came up here to say, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, I want to tell you a story about two sisters. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the typical wedding speech they were expecting. I could see my father half standing, uncertain whether to stop me or wait it out. My mother's face had gone from shock to a frozen smile, her crisis management expression. When I was 7 and Camilla was 9, she won the regional spelling bee. Our parents threw her a party with a custom cake that said, "Congratulations, champion." That same year, I placed second in an art competition. My painting hung in the local gallery for a month. No one in my family came to see it. I paused, watching recognition dawn on some faces. These weren't just my memories. These were witnessed moments. At 12, I dyed my hair for the first time. Just a few pink streaks. Nothing radical. My mother made me wash it out before school pictures because it would ruin the family portrait. When Camilla pierced her ears a second time at 16, against the rules, she was expressing herself. The string quartet had stopped playing. The room was silent except for my voice. Our family operates on a simple principle. There's a right way to be, and then there's my way. Camilla got straight A's. I got B's and the occasional C. Camilla played classical piano. I taught myself guitar. Camilla went to law school, following our father's footsteps. I studied art and design, following no one's path but my own. I looked directly at my sister now. Her expression wasn't what I expected. No anger, just a strange intensity, like she was really seeing me for the first time. The summer I turned 16, I overheard our mother on the phone with Aunt Patricia. She said, "We're just grateful we had Camilla first, so we knew we could produce a normal child." Gasps echoed around the room. My mother's face crumpled slightly before she recovered. My father finally sat back down, defeated. That same year, I stopped trying to earn their approval. I embraced being different. I dyed my hair purple, got my first tattoo when I turned 18, and chose a career that made me happy instead of one that made me acceptable. And for that, I became the family's open secret, the one they reluctantly mention, the one whose accomplishments never quite make it into the holiday newsletter. I took a sip of water, noticing how my hand had stopped shaking. Last Christmas, when I brought home the news that my design firm had landed a major client, an achievement that meant financial security and creative recognition, the conversation lasted exactly 2 minutes before turning to Camilla's recent promotion. 2 minutes of tepid congratulations versus an hour of celebration for her. My voice caught slightly. This part still hurt. When I started dating Eliza 3 years ago, she wasn't invited to family gatherings for months. When she finally was, she was introduced as my roommate. Meanwhile, from the moment Camilla brought Robert home, he was embraced as the son my parents never had. I looked at Robert then, who seemed genuinely shocked. This was clearly not the family narrative he'd been told. But here's what hurts the most, I continued, my voice softening. It's not the obvious slights or the conscious dismissals. It's the 1,000 tiny ways I've been made to feel that who I am is fundamentally wrong. It's having to shrink myself at every family gathering. It's watching Camilla receive unconditional love while mine always comes with terms and conditions. The weight of decades of silence was lifting with each word. I could see uncomfortable recognition on the faces of extended family members who had witnessed these patterns but never intervened. And the saddest part? Camilla and I could have been allies. We could have been friends. But our parents created a dynamic where there was only room for one kind of success, one definition of worth. I turned to look at my sister again and saw tears streaming down her face. Whether from anger, embarrassment, or something else entirely, I couldn't tell. But I knew I hadn't finished what I came to say. The speech. The microphone felt heavier in my hand as I turned to face Camilla directly. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. "Camilla," I said, my voice gentler now. "I didn't come up here to ruin your wedding or to air our family's dirty laundry for revenge. I came up here because today, when Mom whispered those words to me, I realized something profound. We have been living a lie, all of us, and lies don't make good foundations for the future you're about to build. My sister's mascara had begun to run, dark streaks on her perfect face. Robert had his arm around her, protective but confused. The truth is, I continued, I've spent my life competing for a prize I was never meant to win, and you've spent yours trapped inside a perfect image you never asked to maintain. We've both been casualties of a family dynamic that values appearance over authenticity. I turned to address the wider audience. These witnesses to our family's unraveling. You all see the Alvarez family as the epitome of success. The accomplished attorney father, the elegant socialite mother, the brilliant elder daughter, now married to an equally impressive man. And then there's me, the quirky one, the creative one, the one who never quite fit the mold. My father shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. My mother had stopped pretending to smile. But what you don't see is the cost of maintaining that image. You don't see how my father works 80-hour weeks and barely knows his own daughters. You don't see how my mother's prescription for anxiety has been refilled every month for 15 years. You don't see how Camilla cried herself to sleep before every major exam because anything less than perfection meant failure. I paused, letting the words sink in. These weren't just my secrets to tell, but they were truths that had shaped all our lives. And you certainly don't see how I've spent a lifetime believing that who I am is fundamentally unworthy of my family's love. My voice cracked then, the emotion finally breaking through my determined facade. I hadn't planned to cry, but the tears came anyway. The night before my art school interview, I found a brochure for law school on my desk, placed there by my father. When I got my first major design commission, my mother asked when I was going to get a real job. When I told them I was in love with Eliza, my father suggested it was just a phase, and my mother wondered aloud what she'd tell her friends at the country club. I wiped my eyes, refusing to be embarrassed by my tears. So when my mother whispered those words to me today, "We're embarrassed by your behavior," something in me finally broke, not because it was a new sentiment, but because I suddenly understood that I've spent 27 years trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I looked back at Camilla, whose expression had transformed from shock to something more complex. Recognition, perhaps, or awakening. Camilla, I don't blame you. I've never blamed you. You were cast in a role just as much as I was. You're not my enemy. You're the other victim in our parents' obsession with appearances. And I'm sorry that it's taken me until your wedding day to finally say what should have been said years ago. The room was utterly silent now. Not uncomfortable, but suspended in a moment of raw truth. I love you, Camila. I've always loved you, even when I resented the impossible standard you represented. And I hope, that somewhere beneath the perfect daughter, perfect student, perfect wife persona, you love me too. I took a deep breath, preparing for my final words. So here's my real toast to you and Robert. May your marriage be built on something truer than the foundation our family provided. May you love each other for who you really are, not who you pretend to be. May you create a home where different isn't wrong, where authenticity isn't punished, and where love doesn't come with conditions. I raised my glass, hand still trembling slightly. And may we all, every person in this room, have the courage to live more honestly from this day forward. Then something unexpected happened. Camilla stood up. The protocol dictated that she should remain seated, dignified, allowing this awkward moment to pass. Instead, she rose, tears still streaming down her face, and began walking toward me. The room seemed to collectively inhale, waiting to see what would happen next. Would she snatch the microphone away? Ask security to remove me? Publicly denounce my outburst? She did none of those things. Instead, in front of 200 guests, my perfect sister did the most imperfect thing imaginable. The immediate aftermath. Camilla reached me in what felt like slow motion. The guests were frozen, my parents paralyzed in their seats. She stood before me, mascara streaked and trembling, looking more human than I'd seen her in years. Then she wrapped her arms around me and held me, tight, like she used to when we were little girls, before roles and expectations drove us apart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. her voice too low for the microphone to catch. "I'm so sorry, Sophia." The room erupted in confused murmurs. This wasn't how family confrontations were supposed to end. Not with reconciliation, not with acknowledgement. My mother half rose from her seat, her face a mask of controlled panic. My father sat stone still, his expression unreadable. When Camilla finally pulled back, she didn't take the microphone from me as expected. Instead, she gently guided my hand, still clutching it, back toward her lips. "Sophia's right," she said, her voice ringing clear across the stunned reception hall. "Everything she said is true." The murmurs grew louder. This wasn't in the program. This wasn't part of the perfect day that had been planned for months. I've been complicit in a family dynamic that hurt my sister deeply, and for that, I am truly sorry. Her voice shook, but her gaze remained steady. For years, I've watched Sophia be diminished and dismissed for being exactly who she is. Someone brave enough to live authentically when the rest of us were too afraid to try. My mother stood fully now, making a subtle cutting motion with her hand, the universal sign to wrap it up, to stop the damage. But Camilla, perfect Camilla, who had never defied our parents, ignored her. On my wedding day, I'm making a vow not just to my husband, but to my sister. I see you, Sophia. I value you. And I'm sorry it took this moment for me to find the courage to say so publicly. She hugged me again, and then, to everyone's astonishment, she took Robert's hand and led him to the dance floor, signaling to the band to start playing, effectively ending the speeches and moving the reception forward. The crowd, relieved to have direction, awkwardly shifted attention to the newlyweds' first dance. I stood alone at the microphone, unsure what had just happened or what to do next. My father was the first to move. He stood and walked toward me with measured steps. His face revealed nothing, a skill honed through decades of courtroom battles. When he reached me, he simply took the microphone from my hand and placed it on the table. No words, no acknowledgement, just the removal of my platform. "I think you've said enough," he said quietly. "We'll discuss this later." My mother approached next, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes were cold fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that only I could hear. "How dare you turn Camilla's day into a spectacle about your feelings? This is exactly why we—" She caught herself, aware of watching eyes. "We will address this when the guests have gone." As she turned away, I noticed several relatives watching intently. Aunt Elena, my mother's sister, looked thoughtful rather than judgmental. Uncle Miguel, who had always slipped me extra dessert as a child, gave me a small sad nod. My cousin Lucia mouthed what looked like "call me" from across the room. I moved toward the exit, needing air, space, anything but the suffocating tension of the reception hall. As I walked, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Robert's mother, a woman I'd met only twice before the wedding. "That took courage," she said simply. "More than most people have." Then she released my arm and melted back into the crowd. Outside in the hotel garden, the spring air felt sharp and clean. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was suddenly, strangely calm. I'd done it. After years of swallowing truths, of making myself smaller, I'd finally spoken. The relief was enormous, even as dread built in my stomach at what would come next. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Eliza. "How's it going?" "Still surviving?" She had no idea what had just happened. No one outside that reception hall did. By tomorrow, though, everyone would know. The Alvarez family facade had cracked wide open, and nothing would ever be the same. I sat on a stone bench, watching the fairy lights twinkle in the garden trees. In the distance, I could hear the muffled music from the reception continuing without me. Life moving forward, changed irreversibly by 3 minutes of brutal honesty. Another text notification, this one from Camilla. "Don't leave, please. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, wondering if this was a trap, an ambush organized by my parents. But something in Camilla's embrace had felt genuine, a recognition I'd been waiting for my entire life. Before I could decide whether to go back inside, the garden door opened. It wasn't Camilla who emerged, or my parents. It was Robert, my new brother-in-law, looking simultaneously confused and determined. The transformation. Robert approached cautiously, as if I might bolt like a startled deer. His bow tie was loosened, and he'd removed his formal jacket. Small rebellions against the perfect image. "Camilla sent me to find you," he said, sitting beside me on the stone bench. "She's trying to keep your parents occupied with the cake cutting." I laughed despite myself. Always the strategic thinker. "She's worried about you." He paused, searching for the right words. "We both are." The garden lights cast soft shadows across his face as he looked down at his hands. "I had no idea, Sophia, about any of it. The way Camilla described your family, it was always, 'We're close, but Sophia likes her independence.'" "That's a diplomatic way of saying I'm the black sheep," I replied, not unkindly. I should have seen it. At the rehearsal dinner, at the family gatherings, I noticed things but didn't understand what I was seeing. He looked genuinely troubled. "I'm sorry." His apology, unexpected and unnecessary, caught me off guard. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Robert. You married into this mess today. If anyone should be apologizing, it's me. I ruined your wedding." He shook his head firmly. "You didn't ruin anything. You just made it real." He glanced back toward the reception. "Camilla's been crying in the bridal suite for the last 20 minutes. Not because she's angry, but because she says she failed you." My chest tightened. "That's not true. She was just playing the role assigned to her," he finished. "That's what she said too. But she also said that she used that role to avoid having to stand up for you. That each time she accepted praise at your expense, she was making a choice." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 2 decades of family dynamics settling between us. "She wants to talk to you. Really talk. Not tonight. There's too much happening. But tomorrow. Before we leave for our honeymoon." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "And Sophia? For what it's worth, I think what you did in there was incredibly brave." After Robert left, I remained in the garden for nearly an hour, missing the cake cutting and the bouquet toss. My phone buzzed periodically. Texts from Eliza asking where I was. A message from Aunt Elena saying simply, "I've seen it for years." And most surprisingly, a notification from my cousin Marco. "Mom and Dad are talking about how they should have done more. Your speech is changing things." When I finally slipped back into the reception, many guests had already left. My parents were nowhere to be seen, strategically absent, I assumed, to avoid further confrontation. Camilla caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, secret nod. An acknowledgement. A promise. I didn't stay long. I called a rideshare and left before the final dances, texting Eliza that I was coming home early. I spent the night alternating between moments of powerful vindication and waves of crushing guilt. Had I really just exposed our family's dysfunction at my sister's wedding? What kind of person does that? "The kind who's been silenced for too long," a voice inside me answered. The following morning, my phone rang at 9 a.m. Camilla's name flashed on the screen. I answered, bracing myself. "Can you meet us at the hotel?" she asked without preamble. "Room 512, just you." When I arrived, Camilla opened the door still in her hotel bathrobe, hair wrapped in a towel. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, eyes slightly puffy from crying. Robert sat in an armchair by the window, already dressed in casual clothes. The remnants of room service breakfast cluttered a small table. "Mom and Dad want us all to meet for brunch," Camilla said as I entered. I told them no, said we had early honeymoon preparations. She gestured for me to sit on the edge of the bed. "I've been thinking about what you said all night. I barely slept." "I'm sorry," I began, but she cut me off. "No, don't apologize. Not for telling the truth." She sat beside me, our shoulders almost touching. "I should have been the one to say something years ago. I saw how they treated you. I benefited from it." Robert quietly excused himself, mentioning something about checking on their luggage, giving us privacy. Once the door closed behind him, Camilla turned to face me fully. "Do you remember when you won that art competition in 5th grade? The watercolor of the old oak tree?" I nodded, surprised she remembered. "Mom put it in the kitchen for exactly 3 days. Then it accidentally got damaged when she was cleaning. But I saved it. Her voice cracked slightly. I still have it, in a portfolio under my bed. I kept everything they dismissed. Your high school art show invitation, the magazine that featured your first professional design, the newspaper clipping about your firm winning that sustainability award. Tears welled in my eyes. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I was a coward, she said simply. Because it was easier to accept their version of our family than to challenge it. Because I was afraid if I stopped being perfect, I'd discover they didn't really love me either. They just loved what I represented. The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. We'd both been trapped, just in different ways. When you grabbed that microphone yesterday, I was terrified, she continued. But then you started speaking, and it was like hearing my own thoughts, the ones I never allowed myself to acknowledge. She took my hands in hers. I'm leaving for Bali tomorrow, but when I get back, I want to start over. Not as the daughters our parents tried to shape us into, but as the sisters we actually are. The sister I want to know, the real Sophia, not the family disappointment our parents made you out to be. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. Camilla's expression hardened slightly. They texted this morning saying we need to contain the situation and present a united front. They're still worried about appearances. Of course they are, I sighed. But here's the thing, she said, a new determination in her voice. I'm not doing that anymore. I told them we needed to have a real family meeting when I return. Not to smooth things over, but to address what's been happening for years. For the first time since I could remember, I felt truly seen by my sister. Not as a problem to manage or a disappointment to minimize, but as a person worthy of defense and understanding. It won't be easy, Camilla added. They'll resist. They'll try to make this about your issues rather than their behavior. I know, I said. I've had 27 years of experience with that particular tactic. She squeezed my hands. But this time, you won't be facing them alone. As I left the hotel room that day, something fundamental had shifted. The truth, finally spoken aloud, had created a crack in the family mythology. And through that crack, the possibility of something authentic had begun to emerge. 6 months after Camilla's wedding, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house, a tradition that had always been an exercise in performative family harmony. But this year felt different from the moment I arrived. For one thing, Eliza was with me, her hand firmly clasped in mine as we walked up the familiar brick pathway. For another, when my mother opened the door, there was a moment of genuine hesitation before she leaned in to embrace me. Not the automatic social hug of obligation, but something tentative, almost vulnerable. Sophia, she said softly, I'm glad you're here. The words were simple, but her eyes held a complexity I wasn't used to seeing. Something had changed. The months following the wedding had been difficult, messy, and painfully necessary. The family meeting Camilla had promised took place 2 weeks after she returned from her honeymoon. In my parents' formal living room, a space more accustomed to polite conversation than raw honesty, we had finally begun the process of dismantling decades of harmful patterns. My father, initially defensive and dismissive, had eventually fallen silent when confronted with specific memories recounted not just by me, but by Camilla as well. It's harder to deny reality when it's reflected back by the golden child. I never meant to make you feel less than, he had said finally, his voice uncharacteristically small. I just didn't understand you. My mother had been more resistant, clinging to justifications and deflections until Camilla asked her directly, would you rather be right, or would you rather have a relationship with your daughters? The question had hung in the air like a challenge, and something in my mother's carefully constructed facade had crumbled. The work that followed was incremental and imperfect. There were therapy sessions, some individual, some as a family. There were setbacks and moments of retreat into old patterns. There were difficult conversations about expectations, about love, about the difference between acceptance and approval. And now, here we were, gathered around the Thanksgiving table that had witnessed so many strained smiles and careful evasions in years past. Before we begin, my father said, standing with his glass raised, I'd like to say something. The room quieted. Robert and Camilla exchanged a glance. Eliza squeezed my hand under the table. This past year has taught all of us, I think, that family isn't what you project to the world. It's not accomplishments or appearances. He cleared his throat, visibly emotional. It's showing up for each other even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable. My mother reached for his free hand, her own slightly trembling. Sophia, he continued, looking directly at me, when you spoke at Camilla's wedding, you showed more courage than I've demonstrated in my entire life. You forced us to see what we'd created, a family built on conditions rather than acceptance. I felt tears forming, but didn't try to hide them. These weren't tears of hurt or rejection, but of recognition. We have a long way to go, he acknowledged, but I want you to know that I'm trying to understand the daughter you actually are, not the one I thought you should be. And the daughter you are is extraordinary. My mother stood then, joining him. I spent so many years worried about what other people would think that I forgot to consider what you were feeling. Her voice wavered. When you said we were living a lie, you were right. I was so focused on creating the perfect family that I couldn't see I was damaging the real one I had. Camilla raised her glass. To speaking truth, even when it's terrifying, and to becoming the family we should have been all along. As we clinked glasses, I caught Robert's eye. He gave me a small nod of acknowledgement, a reminder of that night in the garden when everything began to change. Later, as we cleared the table together, a task my mother had always handled alone in years past, maintaining control over her domain, Camilla bumped my hip with hers, a sisterly gesture that would have felt foreign just months ago. Remember when you said you hoped I loved you beneath all the perfect daughter stuff? She asked quietly. I nodded, loading plates into the dishwasher. I always did, she said. I just didn't know how to show it without betraying the role I'd been assigned. But I think I'm figuring it out now. My mother approached, hesitantly taking a stack of dishes from my hands. Your father and I were talking last night, she said. We'd like to come see your new design installation next month, the one at the Modern Art Museum, if that's all right with you. The simple offer, to step into my world rather than expecting me to conform to theirs, meant more than any elaborate gesture could have. I'd like that, I replied. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself on the front porch with my father, both of us seeking a moment of quiet amid the holiday bustle. The November air was crisp, the neighborhood peaceful under a canopy of stars. I want you to know something, he said, breaking the comfortable silence. That day, at the wedding, it was the worst moment of my life, and the best. I looked at him questioningly. The worst because I had to face how I'd failed you. The best because it gave me a chance to know my daughter before it was too late. He looked out into the darkness. Some families never get that opportunity. They go on pretending until someone dies, and then it's too late to fix anything. We're not fixed, I reminded him gently. No, he agreed, but we're honest, and that's where healing begins. As Eliza and I drove home that night, the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood receding behind us, I thought about that moment 6 months ago, that split-second decision to grab the microphone, to finally give voice to years of accumulated pain. Do you regret it? Eliza asked, seemingly reading my thoughts. Speaking up at the wedding? I considered the question carefully. I regret the timing, I admitted, but not the truth. Never the truth. The truth had cost us the comfort of our familiar roles. It had stripped away the polished veneer we'd presented to the world. It had forced us to confront the gap between who we pretended to be and who we actually were. But it had also given us something precious, the chance to build something real from the ruins of what was false. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is speak your truth, even when it hurts. Because without truth, there can be no authentic connection, just the hollow performance of relationships, empty at their core. As we turned onto our street, I realized that grabbing that microphone hadn't been an act of destruction after all. It had been an act of creation, painful and messy, like all births, but necessary for something new to emerge. The family I had now wasn't perfect. It was awkward and uncertain, still learning how to communicate, still healing old wounds. But it was real in a way it had never been before. And that reality, however uncomfortable, was worth every moment of the journey that had brought us here.